My name is Rich Mitchell. I'm the supervisor of English Language Arts for the Westchester Area School District, and I want to welcome you to our school-wide family academies. We're very excited to have you here, and looking forward to talking about this new program that we're working with in the elementary schools in our school districts. I'll let Deb, do you want to introduce?
Sit down and relax a minute. It's been work. I'm Debbie. I'm a teacher on special assignment for English Language Arts. So I kind of have worked for years as a language arts reading specialist teacher, and they have me working with teachers and with Rich as we move through the program.
So we wanted to, just a couple of logistical items before we get started. If you could please make sure that you sign in after when the session's through. If you didn't already sign in, make sure you include the child's name that you are here for, so that we know who they are and what school they go to. And also in the back, you can find our business cards. We have index cards if you have any questions that aren't answered throughout the session, and then some sample books for the K1 program that your students will be experiencing.
Can I just add one thing? If you write us a card with a question, would you please give us your email so that we will respond? Okay. Thank you.
Right. And we are going to try to develop a frequently asked questions page for the website so that you can go on it and take a look once that happens. For those of you who have students in multiple grades, we are recording the sessions. The sessions that take place here in the morning at Spelman, so you don't need to come to the third grade session and the fifth grade session if you don't have. You're more than welcome to, but you don't have to. We'll have those sessions recorded. So thank you very much again for being here, and we'll go ahead and get started. I feel very strongly that I always start off with the mission of our school districts. And if you take a look at it, the idea to educate and inspire our students to achieve their personal best. My favorite word in that, in our mission statement, is inspire. And that's for the very reason that the idea behind education is not only to help students learn, but to inspire them to do things and to inspire them to be great people, whatever they try to do in life. So with our program, that's the same thing. We're trying to make sure we're inspiring a love of reading, not only inspiring the ability to read and the ability to write, but also to inspire them to love reading and really take it on as a lifelong passion and journey. So what we wanted to do today to make sure that you understand that the objectives of our session this morning is to make sure you leave with a pretty good understanding of what occurs during the English Language Arts block of instruction. We want to make sure that you can understand the connections that we're trying to make between curriculum instruction and assessment. And then also just an understanding of the overall program in our school district that we're working with in the elementary schools. So the rationale behind this curriculum in terms of both school-wide as a program as well as foundations at the kindergarten level, which we'll talk about, Deb will talk about after a while, is based in the elements of effective literacy instruction. So all of these things are what you want to have happen in an elementary classroom in terms of literacy instruction. And so you can and this is what we based our selection of school-wide and foundations on. So we wanted a comprehensive, balanced literacy program that includes reading and writing. Obviously, the standards are very important. The Common Core standards, we have the national Common Core standards, and then Pennsylvania adopted their own that were written off of the Common Core standards. We will talk about the workshop model and how that looks and how that is implemented in the classroom. Talk about the literature, and then we want to make sure that we develop a common language around literacy that teachers use throughout grades. So whether your student goes to Fern Hill or Exton or East Goshen, teachers will be using the same language and students will be familiar with that language throughout their careers as elementary students, and then of course into secondary level students as well. Go ahead and ask Deb to come up and talk about it.
So you saw in this previous slide that we wanted a comprehensive balanced literacy program. So this slide kind of talks about what does that mean. So when we talk about a comprehensive program, there's all these elements that go into language arts for kids to be able to be proficient readers and writers. So one of the things early on, particularly in kindergarten, is phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is if you realize that our language is made up of sounds, so that we need kindergarten students to understand that in every word we can break those words into sounds. So if they have the word cat, they can figure out that it's k, I'm doing it wrong, cat. So that they have to be able to break apart the sounds for spelling. They have to be able to pull those sounds together for sounding out words or decoding. But if they can't hear those individual speech sounds, the next part, the phonics, doesn't work for them. So that we need them to hear those individual sounds. So they do a variety of activities to make that happen. Another part that's really important for young kids in kindergarten and first grade to build their sight vocabulary and the words that they can say automatically is rhyming. So that if you have an opportunity to read poetry to them, if you can get them to make sure that they rhyme, because you realize if you can say at, you can say about 20 other words as well. If you can figure out N, you can, the EN, there's a whole lot of other words that you can learn. So that it's really critical that they understand that rhyming piece. And so at the same time they're developing this ability to hear those individual sounds, excuse me, they also are going to be working on phonics. And phonics is understanding the connection between the letters and the sounds. So they need to know that when they see a B, it says B, so that they can sound out. They need to know that if they hear a B, they're going to write a B. So that happens and is part of a comprehensive program. Research has shown the importance of understanding the patterns in our language. I know people always notice the exceptions in our language, but our language is actually 86% regular. So that over the course of the grades K through 2, they'll be working on learning all those patterns. There are 44 sounds in English. They have to learn the letter patterns for those different sounds, and it helps with writing, it helps with decoding words now and even later. And it was interesting, I can tell people who not had phonics training, I'm very diagnostic. So I'm in a museum this summer with my I'm a grandma, that's the story of my life. She started kindergarten. Thanks. I was like, well, I like her. But it was interesting just watching a mother trying to read some of the signs, and you could tell that she didn't know phonics because she was having a hard time kind of decoding the longer words. And it's interesting because, there's people who are like, oh, well, we don't need phonics. 30 years of research say they do need phonics, okay? And they need to understand the language patterns, and it helps them all the time. So once they learn these phonics elements and they hear these sounds, we next move into fluency. That's where you want kids to be able to read the way they speak. So that, I have our robot readers who the cat sat down and who wants to read that? Nobody. So that we want them to develop an ability to read with some expression, to read with some smoothness and fluency, and to read the way they talk. So that fluency piece it becomes kind of second, third grade is really where it hits, but we are working on automaticity to know words and automaticity to be able to use expression and to read well. Vocabulary permeates everything, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. They need to understand that words, single words have more than one meaning based on where they are, that there are nuances of meaning. I was working with some teachers this week and the word vast was in the book. Well, what a great word. It's better than big. It's better than, large. It's vast. It's a vast ocean. So that we want them to understand those nuances of meaning, okay? And there's also just the same word. One of the words in the book was content. The man was content with his home, content with his life. But it also could be content, which gets kids confused, the content of a book, so that those conversations need to happen, even at a young level. Next is comprehension, and that's really what it's all about. In grades 1 and 2, comprehension is really building listening comprehension, particularly at the kindergarten level. You and I know that they can understand a whole lot more than they can read. But we want to build those thinking skills. It's like, so when we read this book, what are you thinking about? And we give them strategies to use so that they know, okay, if I'm reading nonfiction, this is what's going on in my head. If I'm reading fiction, this is what's going on in my head. So that we spend a lot of time on comprehension. Then the other aspect or critical component of a balanced literacy program is written expression. We want kids to be able to express their ideas, whether it's writing a piece to prove that they're an expert on a topic, informational, whether it's sharing their opinion. They have lots of opinions. And it's always like, well, can a little kid write an opinion? They can write an opinion. Okay, they have them. So that we do that, as well as narrative. Can they write a story? Can they write a small poem? All of those aspects, again, comprehensive, balanced literacy. And all of these kind of build and tie. I always say they have one vision as a reading person is they put a strand of ropes, and there's all these strands that kind of tie together along the way to help kids become literate adults. Do you have questions about this part? Okay, so. Oh, you did. You're ahead of me. Okay, well, so what has happened with our programs is we kind of took a look at everything in terms of this one. Okay, so we spent 2 years really looking at what do we have in place and what do we need to do to provide this comprehensive balanced literacy program. So at this point, we're looking at, for word study, phonemic awareness, phonics, and spelling. If a child is entering kindergarten, they're starting with a program called Foundations. And Foundations starts with kind of listening and hearing sounds, words, syllables. They have to be able to tell the words in the sentence. They have to be able to tell syllables in the word. They have to be able to tell the sounds in the words. And then it includes phonics and spelling. And we wanted to start there. Our students in grade 1, how many of you are grade 1 parents? Okay. So what happened is, in grade 1, kids, last year in kindergarten, they had Project Read. So we wanted to continue them in Project Read so that they didn't like, oh, here's this new program and there's all these holes in it. We didn't want to do that to kids. Westchester has, this is kind of the first time we have a multi-year plan. Usually it's like, oh, you didn't have that? We're going to start the new program and everybody does it. We're not doing that this time. I'm happy about that, and I hope you are. So what's happening is our kids who had Project Read in kindergarten are going to continue with Project Read through grade 1. And Foundations will be then, these kids will get Foundations this year, Foundations next year. We're thinking it will move it through 2nd and 3rd grade, you kind of build it across years so no child is feeling like, but I didn't have that before. They will have had it, okay? So that's, so next thing, some of you got a chance to peruse our materials on the side there. We also have bought a program called Schoolwide. Foundations is very word study based. It does have a handwriting component and it does have a comprehension component, but to me it was very rudimentary, so that we needed more. So we bought this program, and if you had an opportunity to look at the books, these materials are going to be used for whole class, small group, and for independent reading. So the teachers have been given books that we call the mentor texts, that they read aloud to the kids and model their thinking. And then, and I'm going to show you this later, then the kids will take that model lesson and try it out, kind of get engaged in trying it out with the book that the teacher has, the mentor text, in whole class. These strategies that are taught whole class can be used with any nonfiction book or used with any fiction book. So then what can happen is in small groups, and you'll see the buckets over there, in small group, they can practice that strategy with a book at their instructional reading level. What that means is that all of our kids are different. So some kids might be, this is probably, I would say November, December, first grade. So some kids might be reading The Penguin's Life in small group, where the pages kind of, look there, okay? But what a beautiful book, right? Beautiful books. While another group of kids might be ready for this. And so in small group, they might be and practice those strategies with this, depending on where they are. And the teachers are very well aware. We want teachers to move kids, know those kids well, know when they're ready to move, that they don't get stuck. Keep them moving, and keep them moving from higher and higher levels. Our data shows that is happening. So they realize that there's a kind of more support in those small groups. Then we want independent reading happening. Kids are taught how to choose a book, and they're kind of work on, you need to be able to sit down and read, to have some stamina and spend some time with the book. Now in kindergarten, that's somewhat looking at pictures. So they might pick a book like this. This is actually a mentor text. But they might have a book where there are no pictures and they just tell the story. And you've probably seen them read. There's the adorable little kids who they've read this book, they've heard the book, and they take the pictures and they make their own story, or they make a close facsimile to. Have you seen kids do this? It is so adorable. If you saw the Piggy and Elephant books, which a lot of kids read, I broke my trunk. I know my granddaughter can turn the pages and tell me every page what's happening, and she's pretty darn close to what the big words say. And that's where they're starting. That's a good thing. They're thinking about text. They're making that match between pictures, and they begin to start saying words. It's like, I know that word is in. I know that word is our. Rudimentary, so that even little kids can be engaged in this independent work. And it's choice. We want them to choose books that they love. Rich talked about inspiring kids. Independent reading to me is a place to inspire. And sometimes I've had to get kids say, here are 5 books, choose one of these. If they have trouble choosing because it can be overwhelming, we bought 200 books per classroom for that, so that's a lot. But I feel like this takes care of a lot, all right? Rich is going to talk a little more about the workshop model, and then realize the other pieces. These books are high quality. We want to build vocabulary. We want them to see, for example, in this book, if I was speaking with the kids, they're probably going to say, on the cover I see birds. And I would say, yes, I see a flock of seagulls. What did I notice? That I'm going to take what they say and take it to a higher level. I see water. Yes, I see the ocean and its waves, bringing that vocabulary to a higher level. And the books are such high quality that you can do that. And you'll see that also in the, I'm going to do a short model lesson with you, and you'll see that in that book as well. So, Rich.
So I wanted to talk about the workshop model and what it looks like. Your students in whatever grade level they are, whether they're K1 or on into 2nd through 5th grade, they will have 120 minutes of English language arts instruction. That may take place and that's an at least number. That may take place all in a row, or it may take place an hour here and then an hour after lunch, however it was scheduled at the individual schools. But they should have at least an hour and 20 minutes, 120 minutes of language arts instruction. Now, in that 120 minutes, there are blocks of instruction. So they might do the foundations lesson, which talks about letters and sounds, and then they might go into a reading lesson. So it's not like they're sitting there for 120 minutes and doing the same thing for that long. So just to sort of be clear, so the workshop model is a very good model. It's research based and it's sort of the way of the future, where students are able to, our teachers are able to chunk their instruction into 30-minute segments or 20-minute segments, whatever it is that they're able to do or want to do in order to make sure the students are successful. So this kind of takes you through what the workshop might look like. And again, this could be an hour long, this could be 20 minutes long, okay? But the setup for the teacher, they talk about the goals with the students, what they're going to be learning, and then they sort of share the agenda about what's going to happen in the next, however many minutes. And then they do a focus lesson. And what that does is help the teacher, it goes with the I do, we do, you do premise, right? So the teacher shows them what they're gonna do by doing it him or herself, and then the students do it with each other and the teacher, and then they're sort of released to themselves. Now, it's different that can take place when I say released. They might not be released in the same way that we would be released. But they're released into working on their own or with partners to make sure that they're doing what they're able to do. Okay, so at the focus lesson, they work together. The teacher models strategies. That's very important. Deb talked about mentor texts. A mentor text is a way for a student to see what happens in text. So they look at the text and they say, okay, this is a really good text for these reasons, and the teacher will go through and talk about why it's a good text. And then during the work time, the students, like I said, they're doing some independent work. They're doing some work with partners, but that time is when the teacher is able to go around and confer, make sure that the students are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and make sure that they understand what they're doing. That's the most important thing. Making sure they understand what they're doing, and making sure that they're on the right track for the skill that they're supposed to be learning that day. If they've learned the skill and they need to move forward, the teacher will help them move forward with something. If they need to back it off and the kids don't seem to understand, the teacher's able to take some time to work with that student or those students and make sure they do understand, and sort of let them go back and try it again, okay? And then wrapping up, we want to celebrate the successes that the students have had. So we wrap the lesson up, make sure the students are able to look at the goals of the lesson and understand what they've learned, and that they have learned it effectively, so that the teacher can move on and the students can move on the next day. Does anyone have questions on the workshop model as it appears? So right now, Deb's going to take us through a model lesson regarding what a student might go through in a workshop model. So I'm going to sit and.
He's going to be my manipulator of pages because I don't think you can see all this. But I want you to imagine. Okay, imagine teachers sitting in a chair with 20 kids sitting around, rapidly waiting for the next great book. And today we're going to read I See a Kookaburra by Steve Jenkins and Robin Page. And frankly, Steve Jenkins is a fantastic author. If your kids haven't met Steve Jenkins yet, I would highly recommend his books. So what we're going to do is what has happened previously is I'm going to go take you through a model lesson. The kids in the class would already have had lessons on matching the photos and words and how they work together in a text. They've also had a lesson on when you read nonfiction, you figure out what you already know about the subject and what you learn from the book, so that what's the add-on as they read. Then they've also worked on text features. For this one, they kind of have to understand that the pictures, and there's kind of captions, sentences that go with the pictures, so that that's part of what they've already had, so realize that. So I'm going to model, but I am going to ask you to turn and talk, which is a common feature in elementary classrooms where they kind of turn to I call them their thinking partner. Not your best friend, find your thinking partner, somebody that you can talk to and think deeply about. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to somebody and make sure that everybody's included, that you have somebody, either one or two people to talk to, okay? So, talk to each other, introduce yourself. Get a thing here. We already know.
Oh, yeah, I know. Hey, close out your conversations, eyes on me.
Standard directions. Oh, wait, you guys, listen. That's new. So, we're going to read this book. What I would like you to do first is take a look at this picture, and it says, "In the desert I see." Just take a minute and keep that idea to yourself. Hold it tight. So, listen while I read. A sharp, oh, I forgot, oops, no, not yet. Rich, I'm sorry, I did something wrong. Out of practice, guess that would be awful. So I do need to say, realize that we've been reading a lot of nonfiction books. And when I read nonfiction, it's usually because I'm curious about something. I choose a nonfiction book because I want to learn something. I might know something already, but I want to add to that by reading this nonfiction book. So as a curious person, I ask a lot of questions. So that I might ask a question that starts with who. I might ask a question that starts with what, or where, or when, or why, or how. So as we read this book, we're going to think about questions. And sometimes when I'm curious, the book answers my questions, but sometimes the book doesn't answer that question, and I keep it in my mind and I hold it tight so that I can look for it either on the web, in a video, on TV sometimes when I watch Discovery Channel I can find things, or I might find another book that will answer my questions, but I'm always going to ask a lot of questions and be curious about the world, particularly when I read nonfiction books. So as we go through this today, I'm going to read this page, and then we're going to think about what questions could we ask about what we see on these pages. All right, so next page. So, a sharp-eyed kickbox leaving its burrow. A long-nosed bat sifting nectar from a flower. An angry diamondback rattlesnake buzzing a warning. A trapdoor spider waiting patiently in its tunnel. I'm given a sign right here. The kids will have a lesson. Do you see how that page is kind of difficult? It's not like straight top to bottom. Kids have trouble with that. So there is a lesson on how to negotiate those kind of pages. You want to come back down? A tiny elf owl, maybe. A tiny elf owl making its nest in a giant cactus. Really? You know what? Keep it small for now. Okay. I don't do a lesson on how to run. Okay. A javelin is sniffing out tender roots. A kangaroo rat bounding over the sand. A poisonous Gila monster creeping slowly over the rocks. So I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to think of a what question. What question? Oh, I missed. So I could ask. It says an angry diamondback rattlesnake is buzzing a warning. That's what the book says. I know that animals, that rattlesnake is, when it says buzzing a warning, it's probably trying to protect itself. So I'm thinking there's two possibilities. I think he could be saying, buzzing that warning to this kangaroo rat because he might want to eat it, but that's probably not a good idea to buzz a warning to him because I don't think you'd want to tell somebody that, hey, up here I come, I'm going to eat you. That's probably not a good idea. So then I'm going to come up with another idea. I see this Kickbox here looking at that rattlesnake. And I'm thinking, perhaps that rattlesnake is buzzing a warning to the Kickbox to say, stay away from me, or I'm gonna get you. And I think that's probably the better of my ideas, right? I could ask a what question? I could ask, let's see. What is this Gila monster creeping towards? And I look at the picture, and I'm thinking I could probably find an answer to that. The Gila monster is probably creeping towards this insect, and I'm not sure what insect it is. It could be an ant. Or the Gila monster could be creeping towards the kangaroo rat. I'm not sure, so I might have to find that out by reading somewhere else or learning something else. But I think he's creeping to get some food. Okay? I might ask a where question. Where does the tiny elf owl make its nest? Notice that's right there on the page. My other ones were broader. It's right there. Kindergarten kids will tend to go with those. Okay? So where does he make his nest? Oh, I see it right here. It's in the text. He makes its nest in a giant cactus. All right. I might ask a when question. When would this trapdoor spider come out of its tunnel? And I noticed something. I noticed a bat. Bats come out at night. I noticed an elf owl. An elf owl comes out at night. So I'm wondering, does the trapdoor spider come out at night like those other animals there? The book doesn't tell me, so that's another one where I want to know, but I'm not sure. And I'm thinking, no, I know that animals come out to get food, so I'm thinking perhaps that spider is going to leave that tunnel when it needs food. Okay. I'm going to ask a why question. So I'm going back to this elf owl. Why would the elf owl make its nest in a giant cactus? Giant cactus, giant. Can you picture it? Giant. So I'm thinking that elf owl's getting its nest up high so that the other animals can't get it. A how question. Oh, how does that kangaroo bound over the sand, the kangaroo rat? I'm thinking about kangaroo. What I know already is that kangaroos jump. So I'm thinking that bounding over the sand means he's jumping over the sand. I look at the legs, and they look almost like kangaroo legs because they're stronger, they're bigger. So I can figure out that perhaps that's what's happening there. I'm going to have you try this next, all right? So here, once again, take a look and see what you see. Hold it tight. Hold it in your head. Did you go to the next page? Now, this one, well, for now, keep it small, Rich, and then I would read this page to the kids, and then I'm going to ask them to think of questions using these question words. And they can use what they know, you can use what the book says, and you can try to figure out what the answer could be, all right, based on what you see. So this says, a natterjack toad looking like a wet, bumpy rock. A stinging anemone pitching a ride. A sea star holding tight with all 5 arms. A peacock worm spreading its feathery tentacles. A hermit crab looking for a new home. A hungry oyster catcher searching for a juicy shellfish. A sea urchin, a colorful pincushion. A poisonous weaverfish waiting for its next meal. Your job is to turn and talk to your partner.
try to come up with 2 questions, and I want your questions to start with these. Who, what, where, when, why, or how. You can use any of those sentences or captions on the page. See if you can come up with 2. Turn and talk.
Yeah, we're supposed to use those.
love the fact that you were all talking. And I wonder if you talked about questions. Okay, so very often I'll present it. Realize that in kindergarten and first grade, well, first grade, hopefully they're starting to know these words. But in kindergarten, they may not be able to say these words. But it is there, and notice how I point? Because they're starting to make those connections. And this is called an anchor chart. It would be up in the room. So, and I would say something like, so did anyone come up with a who question that they could share? Anybody have a who? How about, does anybody have a what question that they'd be willing to share? Thank you.
What does a peacock word mean?
Is that answered in the text? So what would you do about that?
Keep it in
Keep it in your head, because you might find out somewhere else, right? Anybody else have a what question?
We had a similar one. We were saying about the weaver fish. What's his next meal? So what does he eat?
Good. Does anybody have a where question? Yes.
Where is the anemone going to?
Great. Do we have an answer?
No.
No. Sit in a ride. Do you have a where question?
Well, we said, where will the hermit crab find the next home?
Another where question? I thought I saw a hand over here. No. Okay. How about a when question? Anybody come up with a when question? No? I think that's fine. What about a why question? Yes.
Why is the hermit crab looking for a new home?
Yes. And a lot of kids probably would have an answer to that from background, and it's fine to validate that. Bring what you know, connect it with the text. Thank you.
Why is the sea urchin colorful?
Yes. Other questions? Yes.
Why does the frog look like a wet monkey song?
Yes. Uh-huh. And that actually goes to figure that this is an example of a simile, which they have to know in like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So the rudiments of that, it's in the good writing. What else? Any other one? How about a how question? So, oh yes, thank you.
How is the hermit crab stuck on the shell?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Aren't you curious about that?
I don't know.
How does the oyster catcher eat shellfish?
Exactly. Okay, and that you could probably use the picture to speculate and answer, right? So that you're fostering curiosity. Can a kindergarten student read this? No. Can they understand it? Yes. Okay, so that we're building that thinking. This answering questions, I would end with a charge to the students. I would say to them, when you are reading a nonfiction book on your own, either in small group or independently, think about what questions come to mind. And use that to help you understand the text, and also use it to be curious and learn about the world. One of the things that is critically important for kids is background knowledge matters for reading comprehension or listening comprehension. So that the more they know, the more they'll be able to, well, I don't want to say the more though, the easier it is to understand text if they have something to bring to the table when they're reading. So that, it's that building knowledge of the world matters, okay? So then the next step would be to take that skill, practice as a small group if you felt they needed more. You guys did such a good job that I don't think I have to have a strategy group. But I could, okay? Or the teacher may say, hey, pick a nonfiction book, and I want you to read that nonfiction book, and I want you to think about questions. The teacher then would walk around, confer with individual students, move from student to student, and say, so I see you reading this book. Read a little bit to me. What did you notice in the pictures at this level? So what questions do you have about that? And give some individual attention to the child where they are, okay? What happens with this strategy is kids will go to the is and can question. Is it big or is it little? They might do that, and kind of moving them towards these question words is what a teacher might be doing during infer. So, how do you like kindergarten first grade? Do you have questions about that process?
My question is, would the book be like projected like that, or would the
Teachers, okay, so they each have their books. Okay?
The teacher
has their books and the kids are there.
Mhm.
Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. So sometimes, depending on the size of the class, they can just kind of see it because they're right there. They also have what are called document counters. You familiar with those? So they could put them under the doc counter,
Okay.
which is
Just
frankly what
because
I
it
do.
would probably be.
I photograph these to
Yeah.
make that happen, but in the classroom, I would use the doc counter.
Because like as we were talking,
Yeah,
it was easier to.
Right, and realize they're closer, because we did that just because of you're further away. Yes?
Are the first graders doing any written
Written response, yes. We've asked them to do that, and actually what the process in the program is that you read, you respond, which means you're going to pick something from the text that speaks to you. And then you're going to react. So very often, kids might react to, hey, look at this hermit crab getting away, I had a hermit crab, and they'll react. And then reflect, why did you choose that? You might have chosen to talk about the hermit crab because you had a hermit crab, so you can make that connection. You might choose to want a hermit crab, so you reflect on why Mom and Dad didn't buy you one yet. But it's kind of a springboard to writing. Yeah. Yes.
So this is the model book, and then you said they're given a choice. They can pick their own books in their small groups. Is it a guided choice?
The small group books are chosen by the teacher.
So it's going to be.
The independent books are chosen by the student.
So it'll be a nonfiction about nature, like following the same
It
concepts.
doesn't even
or-
have to be about nature. It
Okay.
could be some other, this is, again, these are strategies that you can take to any nonfiction book. And you can basically do this with any nonfiction book. and frankly, we want kids to see that.
Yes.
So the program that they're doing, are they only mentor books, or do they have an actual reader too? Like, is this how the entire program is set up throughout the year?
The books in the bins over here are kind of the reader books.
Okay.
And they have lots of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like we bought 95,000 books. 95,000. So what happens is there are a variety of bins, and each of those bins is a particular level. So the teachers have multiple bins for the small group instruction, and then there was another 180 to 200 books bought for classroom libraries.
So they're all like smaller
They're not, we
picture
don't
books?
have.
They're not like the set
It's not a
readers
big
where
one.
there's,
Mhm.
okay.
It's still a follow-through program, but we wanted real books in their hands. Pretty books that they see in the real world.
Right.
That's what we were going for. Did we talk about that? You know, again, authentic, award-winning text. And you can see the quality of the writing's really high quality.
When the kids are self-selecting, like my daughter thinks she can read like an adult. She has no comprehension, but she's fluent. How much guiding do the teachers give? And you mentioned levels, like do the kids know a span of level?
Okay.
And when does that happen? Sorry.
No, well, so they're taught to choose a book. If using the 5-finger rule, if you're familiar, hopefully they've all had that where, you know, you open the book, if there's 5 words you don't know, and this is the problem. You don't know the meaning or don't know how to say it, that's not the book for you. Try another one. The problem is that a lot of them, it's the meaning, they know everything, just damn thing. So I call it managed choice. There are those kids who just don't make good choices, and then that's when I could have a conference and say, hey, baby doll, like, here are some books that I think would be appropriate for you. Do any of these look appealing to you? This book just doesn't seem like a good fit yet. That yet is critically important for little kids. They'll get there. Or I will say, how about you take that home and mommy and daddy read that with mommy and daddy? But we need something that you can read through and have no problems with. Because you want, again, that increases fluency. So, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I do think there is some management to the choice.
Okay, and as they get older then, even though they'll still carry on the 5-finger, like to find it just right.
Yes.
You have to.
And down the road,
And
yeah.
it's interesting too, is because there's different reasons for reading at different levels.
Yeah.
So that, you know, if they're trying to work on reading with expression and hamming it up, you might want them to pick an easy book and read it to your stuffed animals, read it to your brother and sister. But if they want, everybody's talking about Harry Potter, so now it's Wonder. Everybody's talking about Wonder. So those kids want that book, and they will be able to get through a more challenging text because they want to. You know, so that, you know, I'm uncomfortable, I will be very honest, I'm uncomfortable with saying a kid's this level. There are a range of levels, depending on what they want to do and what they're interested in. I had a question back here.
I was just wondering what diagnostic tools were used by the teachers to determine the level, the
Okay.
instructional level.
Yes. So in K-2, we use the developmental reading assessment, second version. So every child in K-2 was tested in May, and they'll be tested again. There's a window from September to November. So by parent conferences, they're supposed to have another read with these kids to we want to see flow. And the direction is to give it as needed through the year. We don't want to over-test either. And then they test again in May. So it's kind of this cyclical piece to it.
Is there any intention to share those results with?
You can ask. Mm-hmm. Don't get hung up on levels, please. Yes.
Do the reading programs work in conjunction with their library instruction so that, like, the books my daughter's bringing home, should she be able to appropriately read those? Because
We're meeting with the librarians in November.
Okay.
We've met with lots of people. We've had lots of meetings, but they're kind of not yet.
Yeah, okay.
Not yet where it matters.
So based on the developmental reading assessment, does the teacher then, and I assume the students all fall on a range
Yes, they
based
do.
on their, does the teacher have access in the classroom then to whatever that range is of their students?
All of the books for Schoolwide are leveled. I'm not sure, I've asked them not to like throw out. I do not want any child experience a situation where, oh, I'm a B in a big book.
Yep.
Oh, I'm an M. I
Right.
don't want that happening, so I've asked them to kind of be very judicious in the use of those. If you know, as you as a parent, if you want to ask, you can. You know, and again, think in terms of range, not A.
So if my child is struggling, or if my child is
They
doing
have it.
very well, they're gonna have something for them to be instructed.
Yes.
Great.
And just if I can, just an example that I think about with my son, he's 3.5. He's not in kindergarten yet, but I can see him. He loves trucks and anything that has wheels. So if he's at, you know, if he's at he's between A and D, right? He might be able to read a D level book because it's about trucks, because he's interested in trying to get there. And he'll look at the context clues, and he'll also have the fact that he's been reading about trucks since he was 0. But you know, if there's another topic that you know he's not interested in cooking, you know, he's not gonna, he might not, you might start him on a level A, you know, for that. So that band, that leveling band is very important for the teacher to know, and that's why they certainly have the access to the results of the test, of the DRAs.
And we do, and as, obviously, as they are reading in small group, teachers should be watching and listening, and it's like, oh, this kid's doing fine, you know, need something more challenging, or, oh, this kid not quite yet, we might need to, you know, put in something a little easier and then move them up, so that there's adjustments, that flexibility needs to happen. Any question? Okay, now I'll shut up. Oh, I forgot, yeah.
So just to kind of finish up our presentation here, when we talk about written expression, I think it came up, someone asked about whether the students write about their text. They absolutely do, and reading and writing are taught in conjunction and in support of one another. So in order to comprehend a text as efficiently as possible, the student can write about the text. Now, with a kindergarten student or a first grade student, they might be drawing. That might be their form of writing about the text, because they're trying to learn how to form letters, and they, you know, that's the way that they write about the text. So don't think they're writing paragraphs about, you know, what happened or why the sea anemone is hitchhiking with the hermit crab. And then the writing also occurs across the content areas. So at the elementary, at any level, but at the K1 level, the teachers are having students write, draw about what they're learning in social studies and science and math, those types of things. All of that kind of comes into play. So the nice part about elementary school is that the teacher has the students all day. So they know what the kids can do in terms of writing about, you know, a math problem or, you know, or a science experiment, something like that. And then, like Deb said, the teachers are able to, because with this program, the teachers are able to monitor the students constantly. So like we kind of went around and were monitoring with you in terms of your questions. You know, we might have said, well, let's try to get away from the is and the what was the other is and can and move toward a why question, right? So I can do that, and as I'm pacing around the room, I can get the two students back here who are talking about, you know, the fact that they have a hermit crab, and the hermit crab got flung off the porch because it bit the other sibling. You know, I can get them off of that, which is important, right? Because it's an experience they've had, but that's not what we're talking about right now. And then of course I can get someone off the new mascot that the Flyers have brought out. There's a whole other terrifying story. So, yeah, that's, I'm sorry I brought that up. Yeah. And then formally and informally assessing the students. Okay, so that constant going around, making sure the students understand what they're doing. When we talk about formal assessments, we're not talking necessarily about sitting down and taking a test. We're talking about ways in which teachers can keep records and have something concrete to inform parents about, inform their instruction for the child. So that's not to say they're not going to have tests like the DRA or other things, but they, you know, it's not a heavily. We're trying to keep it, like Beth said, keep very conscious. We're very conscious of how much the kids are tested, even from kindergarten, first grade level. So I want to thank both Deb and I want to thank you very much for coming and supporting us and supporting the program, supporting your children. And we have some time for questions if you would like to ask some questions. And then what I will say is that if you did not sign in, if you could please make sure that you sign in with your child's name. And then there's index cards and pens if you have questions that we didn't get to answer. And then also our business cards if you would like to contact us personally.